So what is it that agricultural economists actually do? Well, we're going to find out today. This lecture will look at who employs agricultural economists and what their roles are both at the macro level and the micro level in the agricultural industry. So first off, who gives those people jobs? Well, lots of different companies and organizations employ agricultural economists. One type of job might be working for a large food processing company. These are really big companies you've probably heard of, like PepsiCo, Tyson, General Mills, Kellogg, Mondelez, and many more. Now, these kinds of companies would want an economist on staff for obvious reasons. They're really big companies and they need to know what's going on in the market, both globally and domestically. Agribusiness companies also employ economists. These are companies like our local company Driscoll's that produce berries, or seed companies like Syngenta. We have agrochemical companies like BASF and Bayer. These companies also employ economists. Then we have commodity boards. Now, commodity boards or marketing boards are organizations that are created by producers of the same commodity. And their aim is to improve marketing and to fund research for those commodities. So some commodity boards are national, like the Peanut Board and like the Cattlemen's Association, which promotes beef consumption and production research. We've got the California Walnut Board Commission and the California Milk Advisory Board. There's commodity boards for all different types of products, but these are some big ones. Then you've got governments and intergovernmental organizations. So you have federal agencies like the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, state agencies like the CDFA, the California Department of Food and Agriculture, or the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. An agricultural economist might also serve on a special governmental committee, like the House Agriculture Committee, that puts things together like the Farm Bill. You could work for a financial institution like a bank or a broker. And brokers are basically like middlemen. They're the people who buy all the soybeans from the farmer and then sell all the soybeans to a processor. Or insurance companies. Did you guys know that there's such a thing as crop insurance? So farmers could insure large commodity crops against catastrophic loss that might happen with, say, like an extreme weather event or a market crash. Or you could work for a university. You could teach or do some research. So let's look at the macro level first. What do agricultural economists who are working at the macro level study? Well, they're interested in these two big questions. How do agriculture and agribusiness affect economies as a whole, domestically, meaning in your own country, and globally? And how do domestic or global events, like changes in trade policy, natural disasters, wars, how do those things affect the agricultural industry? Here's an example. We're going to talk about tariffs. Now, if you've been listening to the news for the last 8 or 9 months, you've probably heard this word thrown around a lot. But what is a tariff? Well, basically, a tariff is a tax that's placed on imported goods, and it makes them more expensive for the consumers. But why do governments use tariffs? Well, tariffs are what we call a protectionist policy. One use of them is to protect domestic industries from a flood of cheap imported goods. Like, say the United States wanted to protect its automobile industry. It's going to make automobiles made in other countries more expensive so that American consumers are more likely to purchase American-made automobiles. Tariffs can also be used in retaliation for policies that a government thinks are unfair, policies that another country might instate. So what's going on with tariffs right now? Well, The Trump administration has levied lots of different tariffs in recent events. One of those tariffs is on Chinese steel. So they've increased the price of Chinese steel for American consumers by 50%. And this means that companies, manufacturing companies in the US who use Chinese steel, like say you're a company who makes parts for tractors, you're paying a lot more for the steel than you did before. So not only is this hard on American farmers and American manufacturers, it's also really hard on China's steel industry. And China thinks this is unfair. So they impose a tariff on goods that they typically import from the US, like soybeans. And this causes soybean prices to drop. So US soybean farmers are now no longer able to get the same prices for soybeans as they used to because they can't export them to China, or they can't export as much of them to China. So this back and forth, these retaliations, these are what we call trade wars. Like I said, if you've been listening to the news recently, you've probably heard quite a bit about trade wars. So this type of thing is something that's really interesting to economists working on the macro level in agriculture. And there's many of them who are studying this as it goes on right now. Here's another question that looks at the macro level of things. How do changes in one part of a market affect other parts of the market? So say that all of a sudden apples get really, really expensive. What does that do to the rest of the market? Are consumers going to buy less apples and start buying more bananas? Maybe. That's a question for an economist working at the macro level. Now let's talk about the micro level. Agricultural economists working at this level are concerned with these kinds of questions. How do we make choices about resource use in producing goods, processing goods, and distributing them? And how do consumers make choices about what and how much to buy? So micro-level economists can work in several different fields. There's production economists, and they look at how firms turn inputs into outputs. Take the dairy industry, for example. Production economists working in the dairy industry would look at how companies take the inputs, like dairy cattle themselves, the things we feed dairy cattle, the water used, and equipment like milking machines, and turn them into products like milk. Resource economists look at how natural resources are used in production systems. So an agricultural resource economist would look at how farms use land, water, oil, and other things like rock phosphate, which is a naturally occurring input that we mine and then use as a fertilizer on farms. Then we have financial economists. Financial economists look at how we use money or capital in agriculture. There's other type of economists too. Some micro-level economists might look at the policies for specific goods, like just looking at milk or just looking at wheat. And they ask things like, how do we make these products affordable for consumers while also making sure that farmers can make a living off of them? So in short, there's lots of different niches within the study of agricultural economics, and there's lots of different jobs and different employers. So I hope this gave you a better idea of what kinds of things economists do and what kinds of jobs are available in the field.